Now we are going to discuss brain tumors. And you know, most of the brain tumors occur sporadically, but there are two factors which are going to increase the risk of brain tumors. One is radiation exposure and second is genetic abnormalities. Okay, so brain tumors generally occur sporadically. Clear? So what are the risk factors for brain tumors? Risk factors. So there are two risk factors. One is radiation exposure and the second is genetic abnormalities. Genetic abnormalities. Okay. In genetic abnormalities, the whole list is very important and it is asked frequently in exam. So what are the genetic abnormalities which increase the risk of brain tumors? First is retinoblastoma. Okay. Second is Li-Fraumeni syndrome and third is neurofibromatosis. In neurofibromatosis, there is increased risk of brain tumor in both neurofibromatosis 1 as well as neurofibromatosis 2. Now see, MEN syndrome, what is the full form? Multiple endocrine neoplasia. And in which MEN it is seen? It's MEN1 syndrome. And what kind of tumor is seen? It's pituitary adenoma. Then there is Turcot's syndrome. In large intestine, we discussed that this Turcot syndrome is associated with FAP and HNPCC. So it is associated with both FAP and HNPCC. It is autosomal recessive, mainly associated with FAP, and in FAP, what was the tumor? It was medulloblastoma, and in HNPCC, what was the tumor? It was glioblastoma multiforme. So Turcot syndrome also increased the risk of brain tumor. Then VHL syndrome, von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, and in VHL syndrome, what kind of brain tumor is there? There is cerebellar hemangioblastoma. What is the tumor? It is cerebellar hemangioblastoma. Clear? It is associated with VHL syndrome. Then there is Gorlin syndrome and tuberous sclerosis. Right? So this is the list of genetic abnormalities which increases the risk of brain tumor. Now how to remember? The mnemonic is RL not in MTVGT. Clear? So here you can see R means retinoblastoma, L means Li-Fraumeni syndrome, N means neurofibromatosis, M means MEN1, T means Turcot syndrome, V means VHL, G means Gorlin's, and T means tuberous sclerosis. So this list is very important. You have to remember. After that, there is another question related to WHO classification of brain tumors. So see WHO classification. So what's the WHO classification of brain tumors? So first is neuroepithelial tumor, and in neuroepithelial tumor, what is included? There is glioma, pineal tumors, medulloblastoma, and neuronal tumors, right? And what is included in glioma? You must be knowing astrocytoma, oligodendroglioma, ependymoma, and choroid plexus tumor, right? And in neuronal tumors, there is ganglioma, gangliocytoma, and neuroblastoma, right? So these are included in neuroepithelial tumors. Now second is nerve sheath tumor, and in nerve sheath tumor, which tumor is included? Vestibular schwannoma. Third is meningeal tumor, and what is the tumor arising from meninges? And that is meningioma. Fourth is pituitary tumor. Fifth is germ cell tumor. In germ cell tumor, we include germinoma and teratoma. Sixth is lymphoma, and seventh is tumor-like malformation. So what are those tumor-like malformations? Like craniopharyngioma, which is more common in children, dermoid and epidermoid tumors, and colloid cyst. Eighth is metastatic tumor, and ninth is sometimes there is contiguous extension from regional tumors like glomus tumor. Clear? So this is the WHO classification. After that, lots and lots of questions are asked related to brain tumors And what kind of questions? One-liner questions. Now see the one-liner questions related to brain tumor first. What is the most common brain tumor? And the most common brain tumor is metastasis or secondaries. It is metastasis or secondaries. Now see the second question related to this. What is the most common primary for metastasis to brain? And the most common primary for metastasis to brain is what? Carcinoma lung followed by carcinoma breast. Now see the twist in the question. Most common primary for leptomeningeal metastasis. What do you mean by leptomeningeal metastasis? Around the brain there is covering of meninges. So if metastasis occurs to meninges, that is leptomeningeal metastasis. So the most common primary for leptomeningeal metastasis is CA breast. So 3 important points related to brain tumors. First, what is the most common brain tumor? And the most common brain tumor is metastasis or secondaries. Okay. Now, most common primary for brain metastasis or for metastasis to brain, and we discussed this is carcinoma lung followed by carcinoma breast. Okay. And third, most common primary for leptomeningeal metastasis. Leptomeningeal metastasis, and this is carcinoma breast. Okay. Now see the twist in the question. What is the most common primary brain tumor? And the most common primary brain tumor at this point of time is what? Meningioma, seen in 35% cases, followed by glioma, seen in 30% cases. So most common primary brain tumor is meningioma. So what is the most common malignant brain tumor in children? And in children, most common malignant brain tumor is medulloblastoma. And you must be knowing that medulloblastoma is the most radiosensitive brain tumor. So see, what is the most common primary brain tumor? And this is meningioma. Clear? So meningioma in how many cases? In 35% cases, and it's followed by glioma in 30% cases. Clear? Now, what is the most common malignant brain tumor in children? Malignant brain tumor in children, and it is medulloblastoma. This is medulloblastoma. And what is the another question related to medulloblastoma? That this medulloblastoma is most radiosensitive brain tumor. This is most radiosensitive brain tumor. Clear? So this is related to brain tumor. Now coming to the suprasellar masses. If you're talking about adults, what is the most common suprasellar mass in adults? Suprasellar. So that is pituitary adenoma. And in children, this is craniopharyngioma. So questions related to suprasellar masses. What is the most common suprasellar mass? Most common suprasellar mass. Okay. So first, in adults and in children. Clear? So in adults it is pituitary adenoma. This is pituitary adenoma. And in children it is craniopharyngioma. Craniopharyngioma. Okay. Now see another question, and it was asked many times. Which brain tumor is associated with calcification? So see, craniopharyngioma is also associated, oligodendroglioma is also associated, and meningioma is also associated. Sometimes all three options are there in the question and you have to choose one. So you have to choose the tumor which is having highest risk of calcification. So if we are talking about craniopharyngioma, almost all craniopharyngiomas are having calcification. And if we are talking about oligodendroglioma, approximately 90% of oligodendroglioma are having calcification and 20 to 25% of meningiomas are having calcification. So what are the brain tumors associated with calcification? Clear? And this is craniopharyngioma, okay, followed by oligodendroglioma, followed by meningioma. Clear? So in how many cases? In almost all patients of craniopharyngioma there is calcification. Approximately 90% patients of oligodendroglioma are having calcification, and 20 to 25% patients of meningioma are having calcification. So how to remember? The mnemonic is CALM. So what's the mnemonic? It's CALM. So if you have to choose one, choose craniopharyngioma. If it's not given in the option, choose oligodendroglioma. If it's not given in the option, then we choose what? Meningioma. So this was related to brain tumor. Now coming to spinal tumors. So we discussed what is the most common brain tumor. It is metastasis. And the answer is same for spinal tumors also. So what is the most common spinal tumor? Metastasis. Right? So first important point, most common spinal tumor. And this is metastasis. Then what is the most common primary spinal tumor? And it's the nerve sheath tumor. So second question, what is the most common primary spinal tumor? And this is nerve sheath tumor. Nerve sheath tumor. Okay. Next question, what is the most common intramedullary tumor? And the most common intramedullary tumor is astrocytoma. So most common intramedullary tumor. Clear? And this is astrocytoma. Astrocytoma. Clear? Now see, most common primary spinal tumor is nerve sheath tumor. So what is the most common site of primary spinal tumor? So this is intradural. These tumors are intradural extramedullary. Okay. So the question is, what is the most common site of primary spinal tumor? And this is intradural extramedullary. So this is intradural and extramedullary, right? So these are the four questions or four one-liner questions which are asked related to spinal tumors. Now we are going to discuss the basics related to brain tumors. Means what are the signs and symptoms, how we are going to diagnose it, and what is the general pattern of treatment or management. Okay, so if anybody is having brain tumor, there are three cardinal symptoms. What are the three cardinal symptoms? First, these patients are having seizures. Second, these patients are having headache. Why there is headache? Because there is increased intracranial tension, and this headache is generally severe in the morning and it increases after straining. So it is a severe in the morning, so there is morning headache which increases on straining. And apart from headache, these patients are having nausea and vomiting also. Simultaneously, when there is brain tumor, these patients are having focal neurological deficit also. Initially there might be a chance that patient is not having any kind of focal neurological deficit, but what happens over a period of time, there is progression of focal neurological deficit. And second, this focal neurological deficit is dependent on the location of brain tumor. So these are the three cardinal symptoms. One is seizures, second is headache, and third is focal neurological deficit. Fourth, sometimes patient is having tumor related to pituitary. Now, if there is a tumor related to pituitary or pituitary adenoma, so there are chances that the patient is having endocrine abnormalities also. We discussed previously that what is the investigation of choice for brain tumors? It is MRI. Clear? So see the important points. First, related to clinical features of brain tumor. So what are the three cardinal symptoms? One is seizure, second is headache, and what is the cause of headache? There is increased intracranial tension, and because of that there is headache. And the third is focal neurological deficit. Okay, so we discussed what kind of headache. This headache is worse in morning, clear, and on straining. So this is worse in morning and on straining, and it is associated with nausea and vomiting. Nausea and vomiting. Clear? What kind of focal neurological deficit? So it is progressive, and generally it is dependent on the location. So the type of focal neurological deficit will be dependent on the location. Sometimes if a patient is having pituitary adenoma, so in patients of pituitary adenoma you might find endocrinologic abnormalities. So endocrine abnormalities. Clear? Now how we are going to diagnose? So investigation of choice for diagnosis of brain tumors, and that's what MRI. Now basic principles of management. First, what are the drugs given in the brain tumor? Now see, sometimes because of tumor there is peritumoral edema, and which drug is going to decrease this peritumoral edema? This drug is going to stabilize the cell membrane, and what's the name of drug? It's dexamethasone. One, so we give dexamethasone to decrease the peritumoral edema because it is going to stabilize the cell membrane. Second, sometimes the tumor is very close to sensory motor strip. So if the tumor is very close to sensory motor strip and you are going to operate, there are chances that patient might have seizures, and that's why we have to give what? Anti-epileptics. So anti-epileptics are given for which patients? Tumor close to sensory motor strip. Third drug you must be knowing, we give in head injury also and in patients who are having brain tumor also. And what's that? Mannitol. You know that mannitol is hypertonic solution, right? So this is used for osmotherapy. Osmotherapy means it is going to decrease the cerebral edema, and since it is going to decrease the edema, this is going to decrease the intracranial pressure. So what are the drugs used in brain tumor management? So the management, so first we give dexamethasone, and it is going to decrease the peritumoral edema. And how it is going to decrease this peritumoral edema? By stabilizing cell membrane. Second, we give anti-epileptics. Not in all cases. So these anti-epileptics are given for the tumors close to sensory motor strip. Sensory motor strip. And third, we give mannitol. Clear? And mannitol decreases edema of brain, decreases intracranial tension. So at what time we are supposed to administer this mannitol? Generally it is administered before dural opening and operative resection. So before dural opening and operative resection. Now this is the medical management or the drugs which are given in the brain tumor. Now see, what is the mainstay of treatment of brain tumor? The mainstay of treatment of brain tumor is what? Surgical resection. So surgical resection is the mainstay of treatment in most of the brain tumor. Now why we go for surgical resection? First, if you resect the tumor, you will be having confirmation that what kind of tumor is there, means histological diagnosis. And second, you are going to reduce the mass effect of tumor. So for histological diagnosis and for reduction of mass effect, we go for surgical resection. Now second problem. See, certain tumors are very close to some vital areas. So in brain tumors, what is the problem? That sometimes it is very difficult to remove the whole tumor. Means sometimes it's very difficult to achieve the negative margin. So even if it's not possible for you to remove the whole tumor, we have to remove the maximum amount of tumor so that it is going to reduce the mass effect. Means if some amount of tumor is still left inside in post-operative period, to take care of that remnant, or since there is positive margins in post-operative period, what we have to give? We have to give radiotherapy. So certain tumors which cannot be removed completely in post-operative period, we have to give radiotherapy. There is a second problem with one type of astrocytoma, and that is known as glioblastoma multiforme. In glioblastoma multiforme, what is the problem? There is encroachment of surrounding brain by the tumor. So in these cases also, in post-operative period, what we have to give? Post-operative radiotherapy. So apart from drugs, what is the mainstay of treatment? Is the surgery. Okay, surgery is the mainstay of treatment. And what is the primary goal of surgery? First, histological diagnosis. And second, reduction of or to decrease the mass effect. Clear? Now see, we have to decrease the mass effect or reduction of mass effect with preservation of neurological function. Preservation of neurological function. Clear? And that's why sometimes it's not possible for you to remove the whole tumor. So that's why in post-operative period we have to give radiotherapy. So in which patients generally we give radiotherapy? So if there is positive margin, means tumor is still left inside, and generally tumor infiltrating surrounding brain. So whenever there is tumor infiltrating surrounding brain. And what is the classical example? It is seen in glioblastoma multiforme. Now there is second problem. There are certain tumors which are having CSF spread. So if a tumor is having CSF spread, what you have to do? You have to kill the tumor cells present in CSF. And that's why you have to irradiate the CSF, and we give what? Craniospinal irradiation. So in which cases we give craniospinal irradiation? It is given for the tumors having CSF spread. So we give craniospinal irradiation also. Clear? And it is given for the tumors having CSF spread. So see, the tumors associated with CSF spread. So what are the tumors associated with CSF spread in which we give craniospinal irradiation? First is CNS lymphoma, pinealoblastoma, medulloblastoma, germ cell tumor, choroid plexus carcinoma, anaplastic ependymoma, and primitive neuroectodermal tumor. Right? So how to remember? It is very easy to remember. The mnemonic is CPM germ cap. So the mnemonic is CPM germ cap. C, CNS lymphoma, P, pinealoblastoma, M, medulloblastoma. Germ means germ cell tumor. C, choroid plexus carcinoma, A, anaplastic ependymoma, and P, primitive neuroectodermal tumor. Now see second problem. In brain tumors there are psychiatric symptoms also. and lots of questions are asked related to psychiatric symptoms. Now see, the brain tumor can be infratentorium, below tentorium cerebelli, or supratentorial, above tentorial cerebelli. Right? So generally, psychiatric symptoms are seen in infratentorial or supratentorial tumors. So it is seen in supratentorial tumors. Psychiatric symptoms are more common in supratentorial tumors. Now exactly where? Generally it is seen in frontal lobe and temporal lobe tumors. Frontal lobe and temporal lobe. If the patient is having tumor in temporal lobe, what kind of psychiatric symptom you will see? There is psychosis. And if there is frontal lobe tumor, we find psychiatric symptoms and depression. Okay. So see, what are the psychiatric symptoms? What are the psychiatric symptoms in brain tumor? Clear? So generally it is seen in supratentorial tumors. Okay. First, in supratentorial, it is seen in which lobe? Generally, frontal lobe and temporal lobe. So it is generally seen in frontal lobe tumors and temporal lobe. Clear? Now, what kind of symptom is seen in temporal lobe tumors? In temporal lobe, we see that patients are having psychosis, and in frontal lobe tumors, generally there is presence of psychiatric symptoms and depression. Clear? So you will find psychiatric symptoms and depression in frontal lobe tumors. Related to frontal lobe, lots of questions are asked. Now see, this frontal lobe is going to control the behavior and judgment. It controls behavior and judgment. So if the tumor is located in the frontal lobe, what is the change? Patient will be having behavioral changes or personality changes. So it is going to control behavior and judgment. So since it controls judgment, there is severe impairment of judgment. Apart from severe impairment of judgment, there is severe impairment of insight and foresight also. So in frontal lobe tumors, see the problems. Frontal lobe, it controls behavior and judgment, Clear? So since it controls behavior and judgment, these patients might be having behavioral changes or personality changes. So patients will be having personality changes. What kind of personality changes? You will notice that these patients are having antisocial behavior. So there is socially inhibited patients. So these patients are socially inhibited. Why? Because these patients are having antisocial behavior, right? Now, since frontal lobe also controls judgment, so what is the problem? There is severe impairment of judgment, insight and foresight. Judgment, insight and foresight. Okay, simple. Then long back in All India, one question was asked: pathological joking. What is the other name of pathological joking? It is also known as Witzel-Schütz syndrome, and this Witzel-Schütz syndrome is also seen in frontal lobe tumors. Okay, so what is this Witzel-Schütz syndrome? It is also known as pathological joking. Clear? And this pathological joking, it is also seen in frontal lobe tumors. Clear? Now see, in frontal lobe, if the tumor is in the right lobe, there are some different kind of psychiatric symptoms, and if it's in left lobe, there are different symptoms. So if the patient is having tumor in right lobe, these patients are having what? Euphoria. And if the tumor is located in left lobe, these patients have what? Akinesia and depression. So see, in frontal lobe tumors, if the patient is having tumor in right lobe, clear, these patients have euphoria. And if the patient is having left lobe tumor, these patients have akinesia and depression. Clear? So akinesia and depression. So these are the important points related to psychiatric symptoms, and these are frequently asked in exam. Now we are going to discuss the individual brain tumors in detail. First we are going to start with benign tumor. Okay, so what is the benign tumor? Hemangioblastoma. You know, hemangioblastoma, hemangio. So it's the vascular tumor of CNS and it's a benign tumor. So first we are going to discuss hemangioblastoma. So hemangio means it is related to vascularity. So it is vascular tumor of CNS. Now see, hemangioblastoma is most common primary intraaxial tumor in adult posterior fossa. In adult posterior fossa. Okay, now see the location. So this is the most common intraaxial tumor in adult posterior fossa. So what is the most common site? Obviously posterior fossa means cerebellum. So the most common site of hemangioblastoma is what? Cerebellum. And if the most common site is cerebellum, what is the problem? These patients have cerebellar dysfunction. One problem. Second, we discussed that it's benign. Now see, it is related to hemangio. Clear? So these patients have abundant thin-walled vascular channels. What? Abundant thin-walled vascular channels. Simultaneously, these patients who are having hemangioblastoma hemangioblastoma is also going to produce increased erythropoietin. So if the patient is going to produce increased erythropoietin, what is the problem? These patients are having what? Polycythemia. And we discussed the tumor is benign. So this tumor is benign, associated with abundant thin wall vascular channel. Now see, in 80% cases it is sporadic. Clear? And in 20% cases it is associated with VHL syndrome. VHL syndrome. What is the full form of VHL syndrome? Von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. So apart from cerebellar hemangioblastoma, what are the other associations of VHL syndrome? So here you can see, apart from cerebellar hemangioblastoma, these patients are having retinal angioma. There is RCC, renal cell carcinoma, there is renal cyst, presence of pheochromocytoma, there is a nodule or tumor in epididymis, there is endolymphatic sac tumor and pancreatic cyst. So these are the associations with VHL syndrome. VHL syndrome is frequently asked in skin medicine, pathology, surgery, and how we can easily remember the mnemonic is CAR-PEEP. So it's CAR-PEEP. Clear? So cerebellar hemangioblastoma, angioma, where in the retina, RCC, renal cyst, pheochromocytoma, epididymal nodule or tumor, endolymphatic sac tumor and pancreatic cyst. Now see the clinical features. It is very easy to understand. So the most common site is cerebellum. So what is the first problem? These patients have cerebellar dysfunction. So there is cerebellar dysfunction. These patients have hydrocephalus. So there is hydrocephalus. Clear? There is increased intracranial tension, and because of this increased intracranial tension, what is the symptom? There is headache. Yes, fourth thing we discussed, that in these tumors there is increased erythropoietin production, and because of this increased erythropoietin production, what will you find? There is polycythemia. Simple. We discussed that in brain tumors, what is the investigation of choice for diagnosis? MRI. So see, so investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that's what? It's MRI. So you can see here what are the findings here. So here can you see the tumor? Notice. So if you see the tumor appears cystic. So what kind of tumor? It is cystic tumor. Now in this cystic tumor, can you see the wall? This is the wall. And if you see the walls are enhancing or non-enhancing. So you can notice it's non-enhancing. And then you can notice that there is a mural nodule. And this mural nodule is enhancing or non-enhancing? Enhancing. So here you can see there is cystic tumor with non-enhancing wall, and there is enhancing mural nodule. Okay, so on MRI there is cystic tumor having non-enhancing wall, clear, and there is enhancing mural nodule. Simple. So what is the treatment? Here we have to go for surgical excision, and in this surgical excision what we are supposed to excise mainly, we have to go for en bloc excision of this mural nodule. Clear? So the treatment is surgical excision, and generally we go for en bloc excision of mural nodule. En bloc excision of mural nodule. Clear? So this is how we manage hemangioblastoma. Now we are going to discuss glioma. So see, what are the tumors which are included in glioma? Astrocytoma, oligodendroglioma, and ependymoma. Okay, so these are included in glioma. One by one we are going to discuss. First we are going to discuss astrocytoma, which is very, very important and frequently asked in exams. Astrocytoma. Now see here, the term is self-explanatory. The name of tumor is astrocytoma. So the tumor is arising from astrocytes. Okay. Now, if you are talking about this astrocytoma in adults, the location is supratentorial, and in children it is infratentorial. In adults, if the location is supratentorial, what is the most common site? It is cerebral cortex, and in children it's infratentorial, so most common site is cerebellum. Now, what is the most common type of astrocytoma? See, generally in children it's low grade, and in adults it's high grade. So what is the most common type of astrocytoma in children? It's pilocytic astrocytoma. And the most common type of astrocytoma in adults, it is glioblastoma multiforme. Pilocytic astrocytoma is low grade, so that's why it is having best prognosis, and glioblastoma multiforme is most malignant type of astrocytoma, and that's why it's having worst prognosis. So these are important points. Have a look. First, it is arising from astrocytes. So astrocytoma arises from astrocytes. Generally it is, or mostly it is, supratentorial in adults, and this is infratentorial in children. So if it's supratentorial in adults, what is the most common site in adults? In adults, it's the cerebral cortex. So the most common site is cerebral cortex, right? And in children, the most common site is cerebellum. Cerebellum. Okay, one question. Second, what is the most common type? Most common type of astrocytoma in children and in adults. Clear? So we discussed that in children it is which one? Pilocytic. And this pilocytic astrocytoma is having best prognosis among astrocytomas. So among astrocytomas, best prognosis, and in adults, the most common type of astrocytoma is glioblastoma multiforme. This glioblastoma multiforme is most malignant, and since it is most malignant, this is having worst prognosis. It's associated with worst prognosis. Okay, astrocytoma is also asked in pathology. Lots of questions are asked. Now see the special features. What is the tendency of astrocytoma? That it is going to encroach or infiltrate the surrounding brain, right? So whenever it is going to encroach or infiltrate the surrounding brain, in treatment we have to perform cytoreductive surgery, means remove the maximum amount of tumor, cytoreductive surgery, and in post-operative period what we give? External beam radiotherapy. But there are two types, or there are two exceptions where there is no infiltration of brain. And what are those types? One is pilocytic astrocytoma and second is pleomorphic xanthoastrocytoma. Okay, so see questions related to pathology. Generally, astrocytomas, they are going to infiltrate the surrounding brain. Infiltrate the surrounding brain. Clear? So what are the exceptions? There are two exceptions. First is pilocytic astrocytoma. Pilocytic. Okay. And the second is pleomorphic xanthoastrocytoma. PXA, pleomorphic xanthoastrocytoma. After that, see what are the special features of high grade astrocytomas. So if patient is having high grade astrocytoma, what are the histological features? So these patients have hypercellularity, there is nuclear atypia and endovascular hyperplasia. So there is hypercellularity, there is nuclear atypia and endovascular hyperplasia. These are seen in high grade astrocytoma. There is one question which was asked both in surgery as well as in pathology, and sometimes integrated question is asked, that astrocytoma was removed, what is the unique feature of glioblastoma multiforme on pathology? So there is a unique feature of glioblastoma multiforme, and that is necrosis, and this necrosis is required for diagnosis of glioblastoma multiforme. So what is the unique feature of this glioblastoma multiforme? In these patients there is necrosis. This is the unique feature, and this necrosis is required for diagnosis. So this is required for diagnosis of glioblastoma multiforme. After that, there is one question which is asked in surgery, pathology, pediatrics. And what is that question? WHO classification of astrocytoma. So according to WHO classification, there are 4 grades of astrocytoma: grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. So see the WHO classification of astrocytoma. So it's of 4 types: grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 and grade 4. Okay, what is the name of grade 1 astrocytoma? This is known as pilocytic astrocytoma, and we discussed that pilocytic astrocytoma is the most common type of astrocytoma in children. And what is the special feature? That it doesn't infiltrate the surrounding brain. So it doesn't infiltrate the surrounding brain, and if it doesn't infiltrate the surrounding brain, what is not required in the treatment? Post-operative radiotherapy. So what is sufficient in these patients? Radical resection or surgical resection. Clear? So what's the treatment here? What is sufficient? Radical resection, and that's sufficient. Simple. Now grade 2 astrocytoma is also known as low grade astrocytoma. So what is the other name? It is also known as low grade astrocytoma, right? And grade 2 or low grade astrocytoma, this is generally seen in children and in young adults. And what is the most common presentation here? Seizures. Okay, so this is seen in children and young adults, and these patients have seizures as the presentation. Clear? Usually we discussed that in majority of astrocytoma, what is the preferred treatment? We go for cytoreductive surgery followed by external beam radiotherapy. What is the exception? Pilocytic, because here there is no infiltration of surrounding brain, so radiotherapy is not required. In low grade astrocytoma, means in grade 2, here in treatment, what we go for, generally we give radiotherapy plus we give chemotherapy plus minus surgery. So this is the treatment option for grade 2. What's the grade name of grade 3 astrocytoma? It is known as anaplastic astrocytoma. So the other name of this is anaplastic. Okay. And what is the special feature? If you see MRI of anaplastic astrocytoma, there is irregular enhancement. So in these patients on MRI, there is irregular enhancement. Clear? And since it is going to infiltrate the surrounding brain, what's the treatment? The treatment is we go for cytoreductive surgery followed by external beam radiotherapy. Okay, and the most important is grade 4, and this grade 4 is what? Glioblastoma multiforme. This grade 4 is glioblastoma multiforme. Now see, we discussed that most common type of astrocytoma in children, it's pilocytic, and most common type of astrocytoma in adults, it's glioblastoma multiforme. Imagine if nothing is mentioned in the question and the simple question is asked, what is the most common type of astrocytoma? And then it is glioblastoma multiforme. So overall, most common type of astrocytoma, glioblastoma multiforme. Most malignant astrocytoma, glioblastoma multiforme. Having worse prognosis, glioblastoma multiforme. So 3 important points. Overall, this is most common type. It is most malignant and having worse prognosis. This is having worse prognosis. Now see the questions related to pathology about glioblastoma multiforme. These tumors have endothelial proliferation. There is endothelial proliferation, and we discussed that what is mandatory for diagnosis? There is necrosis. So in these tumors, there is necrosis. And if you see the tumor on MRI, what kind of necrosis is seen? There is central necrosis. And if you see the central necrosis in periphery, there is ring-like enhancement. And this is the characteristic feature. Now see these two pictures. What you can see here, that there is central necrosis. And can you see there is ring-like enhancement? And if you see the shape of tumor, can you see the shape is like butterfly? What is the special feature? That these tumors are going to cross the midline. Can you see here? So the tumor is going to cross the midline and it looks like butterfly. So what? It is also known as butterfly tumor. This was an image-based question asked in JIPMER, that there is central necrosis with ring-like enhancement, and it is seen in which tumor? It is seen in glioblastoma multiforme. So special features, you can see there is central necrosis and there is ring-like enhancement. Ring-like enhancement. Clear? Since the tumor crosses midline, can you see here? So that's why it is also known as butterfly tumor. So this is also known as butterfly tumor. Let me tell you, there are two image-based questions asked about brain tumors. One, glioblastoma multiforme is asked, showing ring-like enhancement and there is central necrosis of butterfly tumor. And second is meningioma, in which dural tail sign is being given and the question is asked. So these are two important image-based questions asked related to brain tumors. So now coming to the management in glioblastoma multiforme. So obviously we will go for cytoreductive surgery and we have to go for external beam radiotherapy, right? Now see, in malignant gliomas, we give two chemotherapy agents. So what are the chemotherapy agents which are given in malignant glioma. You have to remember the names. And one is carmustine and second is cisplatin. So we give carmustine and cisplatin. Now there is a new agent which is given for newly diagnosed glioblastoma multiforme or recurrent glioblastoma multiforme. So what's that new agent? It is the temozolomide. This is again very important question. So there is a new agent. The name is temozolomide. Clear? And what is the use especially in glioblastoma multiforme? It is given in newly diagnosed glioblastoma multiforme and it is given in recurrent glioblastoma multiforme. Right? This temozolomide is not only given in glioblastoma multiforme, it's also used in oligodendroglioma. Clear? So let's discuss oligodendroglioma. Oligodendroglioma is responsible for 10% of gliomas. So this is responsible for 10% of gliomas. What is the most common site of oligodendroglioma? It's the frontal lobe. And in this, the most common genetic alteration is loss of heterozygosity of chromosome number 19q followed by 1p. Now see the special feature. The patients in whom there is loss of heterozygosity of 19q followed by 1p, actually speaking, these patients have better prognosis and there is robust response to which agent? Temozolomide. So oligodendroglioma, the most common site is frontal lobe. It's the frontal lobe. Now see the most common genetic alteration. Clear? And this is loss of heterozygosity of chromosome number 19q followed by 1p. And the patients who are having this kind of loss of heterozygosity, actually speaking, these patients have better prognosis. And what is the another good thing? That there is robust response to which agent? We discussed that new agent. So robust response to which agent? Temozolomide. Questions are asked both in surgery and pathology. See pathology related questions. So if you see the histological features, yes, this patient or this tumor is having fried egg cytoplasm. Fried egg cytoplasm. See another feature. There is chicken wire vasculature. So fried egg cytoplasm, chicken wire vasculature, and there is microscopic calcification. Clear? Now can you see fried egg chicken? So actually speaking, this tumor is non-veg tumor. So how to remember? It's a non-veg tumor. So there is fried egg cytoplasm, chicken wire vasculature, and microscopic calcification. If you are talking about the symptoms, the most common presentation, these patients have seizures. So see the clinical features. Most common symptom is seizure. Okay. Now just like any other brain tumor, we are going to make the diagnosis on MRI. Okay. When we were discussing the tumor calcification in brain, means brain tumor having calcification, we discussed that almost all craniopharyngiomas were having calcification. Approximately 90% patients of oligodendroglioma are having calcification. So there are two questions. First, what is the investigation of choice for diagnosis of oligodendroglioma? It is MRI. And if we want to see the calcification, investigation of choice to see the calcification in oligodendroglioma, and that's CT. And in how many cases we are going to find the calcification on CT? 90%. So diagnosis. So overall investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that's MRI. we go for CT. CT is done to see the calcification. So in how many patients we see calcification? In 90% of oligodendroglioma. Right? Now see the treatment. Brain tumor, in most of the cases we have to go for surgical excision. So here also we go for surgical excision. Apart from surgical excision, we have to give chemotherapy. So the treatment is, here we go for surgical excision, clear, plus chemotherapy. Now see what is the chemotherapy regimen given in oligodendroglioma, and it is PCV. So what is the full form? PCV. So P is procarbazine, is the procarbazine. C is CCNU. Okay, CCNU is also known as lomustine. So this is lomustine, and V, that's vincristine. Vincristine, clear? And we discussed that if a patient is having loss of heterozygosity of chromosome number 19q followed by 1p, in these there is robust response to temozolomide. So in these patients we give temozolomide, and these patients have better prognosis. Next is ependymoma. The name of tumor is ependymoma. Clear? So since the name is ependymoma, it is arising from ependymal linings of cerebral hemisphere and remnants of central canal in spinal cord. It arises from ependymal linings of cerebral hemisphere and remnants of central canal in spinal cord. So what is the most common site of this ependymoma in children? The most common site is fourth ventricle. And what is the most common histological type in adults? Is the myxopapillary ependymoma. And generally, what is the most common site of this myxopapillary ependymoma? It is arising from phylum terminale of lumbosacral region. So all these are important points. So it arises from ependymal linings of cerebral hemisphere and remnants of central canal of spinal cord. Okay, what is the most common site in children? And that's fourth ventricle. That is fourth ventricle. Clear? So what is the most common histological type in adults? In adults, the most common histological type is myxopapillary ependymoma. Myxopapillary ependymoma. Clear? And generally, this myxopapillary ependymoma, it is arising from phylum terminale in lumbosacral region. Simple. Now see basic things. Here you notice that the tumor is in relation to ependymal linings, it is in relation to fourth ventricle. It means directly or indirectly it is in close relation to CSF, and that's why CSF spread is seen in ependymoma, right? And we discussed that any tumor, any brain tumor which is having CSF spread, what is given? Craniospinal irradiation is given, one principle. Second, investigation of choice for diagnosis of most of the brain tumor is what? MRI. So here also investigation of choice is MRI. Treatment, we have to go for maximum possible tumor resection, and followed by we have to give what? Radiotherapy. So see, diagnosis, investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that's MRI. And in the treatment we go for maximum possible tumor resection. Okay, and in post-operative period we have to give what? External beam radiotherapy. Since the tumor is having CSF spread, tumor is having CSF spread, and because of this CSF spread, what else we have to give? We give craniospinal irradiation. So in these patients, we give craniospinal irradiation. Next tumor is medulloblastoma. Okay. And we discussed that this medulloblastoma is the most malignant brain tumor of children. Clear? So this is most malignant brain tumor of children. And in what particular age this medulloblastoma is seen? It is seen in 3 to 4 years of age. And we discussed that this is the most radiosensitive brain tumor. Okay. So this is most common malignant brain tumor in children. Second question, this is most radiosensitive brain tumor. And generally in what particular age group it is seen? It is seen in 3 to 4 years of age. Clear? Now see what is the location in children and what is the location in adults. So if you see this picture of cerebellum, generally in children, this is the site. So what is the site in children? In children, the most common site is vermis. Clear? So in children, the most common site is vermis, right? And what is the most common site in adults? This is the site. So what is this? This is lateral cerebellar hemisphere. So in adults, the most common site is lateral cerebellar hemisphere. It's lateral cerebellar hemisphere, right? Now see the problems. Generally in children, the location most common site is vermis, and in children there is increased intracranial tension. So what are the signs and symptoms in children? Signs and symptoms related to increased intracranial tension, like headache, like there is papilledema, like there is vomiting. So these symptoms are there in children. And if you see the location of tumor in adults, it's in lateral cerebellar hemisphere. So in adults there is ataxia and unilateral dysmetria. Okay, so see the clinical features. So in children there are signs and symptoms of increased intracranial tension. And if you see the location in adults, here these patients are having ataxia and unilateral dysmetria. Why? Because of the lateral location of the tumor, right? Now another problem, investigation of choice for diagnosis is what? MRI. Problem in medulloblastoma, that medulloblastoma is having CSF spread, and this is also known as drop metastasis. So via CSF, what happens in medulloblastoma? There is early tumor dissemination. And since in medulloblastoma there is early tumor dissemination, the question is asked that what is the most important prognostic factor in medulloblastoma, and that is tumor dissemination. Clear? So see, for diagnosis, investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that's MRI. And these patients have CSF spread, that's also known as drop metastasis. And because of this drop metastasis, the problem, there is early tumor dissemination. Early tumor dissemination. Clear? So what is the most important prognostic factor? The most important prognostic factor is what? This tumor dissemination. We discussed that medulloblastoma is most radiosensitive tumor. Despite of being most radiosensitive brain tumor, the primary treatment in medulloblastoma is what? Surgical resection. And after surgical resection, we give chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So with surgical resection, we have to give chemotherapy and radiotherapy. So see the treatment. So in these patients, we go for surgical resection followed by radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Clear? So what are those chemotherapy agents generally we give? We give carmustine and vincristine. So the agents given are carmustine. What is the other name of carmustine? It is also known as BCNU and vincristine. Clear? Now see, there is a special role of this chemotherapy. So generally this chemotherapy is specially given in the patients who are having recurrences, and the patients are poor risk patients. So recurrences in poor risk patient, we give chemotherapy. And if the age of child is less than 3 years, age is less than 3 years, and if the child is less than 3 years of age, and if you give the radiotherapy, there are lots of complications related to radiotherapy. So generally this chemotherapy is given in which patients? Having recurrences. So recurrences in poor risk patients, and it is given in children less than 3 years. Why? To avoid the complications of radiotherapy. Now we are going to discuss meningioma. Again, very important tumor. Meningioma. So we discussed that meningioma is the most common primary brain tumor, responsible for 35% of the cases, and followed by glioma, which is responsible for 30% of cases. This is the most common intracranial, extraaxial, dural based neoplasm. And what is the location? Can you see? It is located in the midline along superior sagittal sinus, and it is arising from meningomesothelial cells of arachnoid. So all these are important points. First, this is the most common primary brain tumor. Clear? This is the most common intracranial, extraaxial, dural based neoplasm. Dural based neoplasm. Okay. Meningioma is more common in females, right? And it arises from meningomesothelial cells of arachnoid. So it is arising from meningomesothelial cells of arachnoid. Clear? And generally, what's the location? It is located along superior sagittal sinus. So located along superior sagittal sinus. Clear? Now see the questions related to pathology. So pathology related questions. So this tumor is generally slow growing and encapsulated. And what happens in 20 to 25% cases, you will find what? Calcification. What kind of calcification is seen in meningioma? There is dystrophic calcification, and the dystrophic calcification in meningioma is known as what? Psammoma bodies. And the psammoma bodies are also seen in which other conditions? Papillary carcinoma thyroid, papillary variant of RCC, serous cystadenoma ovary, and meningioma. So see important points. Meningioma is slow growing. This is encapsulated. And what kind of growth pattern is there? There is in-plaque pattern of growth. There is in-plaque pattern of growth. Okay. Another important point, that in 20 to 25% cases, there is calcification. And generally, what kind of calcification is seen? And that's dystrophic calcification. And this dystrophic calcification is also known as psammoma bodies. So generally, in which condition we are going to see the psammoma bodies? The mnemonic is PSM. P means papillary carcinoma thyroid, papillary variant of RCC, S means serous cystadenoma ovary, and M is meningioma. Now see the clinical features. The clinical features of meningioma are somewhat different from rest of the brain tumors. Why? Because these patients are having motor deficit, sensory deficit, and sphincter dysfunction of bladder. What is the problem in motor deficit? That these patients are having lower limb weakness and there is spasticity. So this question was asked many times in all India. See the clues. A 40 years old female presented to you with lower limb weakness, with sensory deficit of perineum and bladder dysfunction, when CT or MRI was done, there was dural tail in the tumor, and it suggests the diagnosis of meningioma. Okay, so see the clinical features. So in 90% patients, these patients have motor deficit, and it is going to manifest as spasticity and lower limb weakness. Sensory deficit, especially in the perineum, it is seen in 60% of patients, and these patients have sphincter dysfunction of bladder. Now, what is the investigation of choice for diagnosis? So investigation of choice for diagnosis is MRI, and we discussed that image-based questions are asked about this tumor. Now see the questions. Can you see it's a dural based neoplasm, and can you see what is this sign? This is dural tail. This is dural tail sign. So dural based neoplasm, dural tail sign. In these patients there is raised intracranial tension. So you will notice what the signs of raised intracranial tension. There is enlarged foramen spinosum. What is the special feature of this meningioma? That these patients have localized hyperostosis. So that is bony hyperostosis. And if you are going to palpate the skull, what happens? You will notice that there are projections, these kind of projections, and this is also known as what? Sun ray spicules. Okay, so what are the radiological signs which are seen in meningioma? We discussed that calcification is seen in 20 to 25% patients. Clear? Then signs of raised intracranial tension. There is enlarged foramen spinosum, enlarged foramen spinosum. Clear? And the questions which are asked in exam, that's dural tail, bony hyperostosis, and sun ray spicules. So these patients have dural tail sign, there is bony hyperostosis, clear, and sun ray spicules. Right? Now, how we are going to treat meningioma? Obviously, we have to go for surgical resection, and there is a named grading which is used for meningioma resection, that's known as Simpson grading. Right? So the treatment is the surgical resection, and what's the name of grading? Is the Simpson grading. So for meningioma resection, we use Simpson grading. So we discussed what is the most common suprasellar mass in children and what is most common suprasellar mass in adults. Most common suprasellar mass in children is craniopharyngioma, and the most common suprasellar mass in adults is pituitary adenoma. Right? So first we are going to discuss pituitary adenoma. Pituitary adenoma. Right? Pituitary adenoma is asked in medicine as well as in surgery. So first question, what is the most common cause of hyperpituitarism? Hyperpituitarism, and the most common cause of hyperpituitarism is pituitary adenoma. Clear? So the most common cause of hyperpituitarism. Clear? And that is pituitary adenoma. Now, generally, what is the most common site of pituitary adenoma? It can arise from anterior pituitary as well as from posterior pituitary, but the most common site is anterior pituitary. Now, see what kind of pituitary adenomas are there. It can be functional or non-functional. Functional means it is secreting some active substance. Non-functional means there is only mass effect but it is not secreting any active substance. Now what do you mean by functional? Suppose pituitary adenoma is secreting what? Prolactin. And if it is secreting prolactin, so this tumor is prolactinoma. And because of excessive secretion of prolactin, these patients will be having what? Galactorrhea and amenorrhea. If patient is secreting growth hormone, so there is growth hormone secreting tumor, and because of excessive secretion of growth hormone, either there is gigantism or there is acromegaly. Right? So important points. What is the most common site? And that's anterior pituitary. Clear? and it is divided into two types. One is known as functional, also known as secreting. Second is known as non-functional or non-secreting. So non-functional or non-secreting. So in functional adenoma, what happens? There is secretion of active substance, and that's why these patients have early presentation. Because of physiological effect, there is early presentation. In cases of non-functional tumors, there is delayed presentation. Okay, now see the problem. Initially, patient is asymptomatic when the tumor is small, but when there is increase in the size of tumor, so there is mass effect. This mass is going to compress the optic chiasma, and because of compression of optic chiasma, these patients have bitemporal hemianopia. So what happens? These patients become symptomatic because of mass effect. Okay, and whenever this mass is going to compress, it compresses optic chiasma. Clear? And because of this compression, these patients have bitemporal hemianopia. Bitemporal hemianopia. After that, in AIIMS as well as in PGI, this question was asked that how you can differentiate pituitary adenoma from pituitary hyperplasia. So if you see, in pituitary hyperplasia is positive for reticulin stain. So that's how we can differentiate. So how we can differentiate pituitary adenoma from pituitary hyperplasia? So in pituitary hyperplasia, it's positive for reticulin stain. It's positive for reticulin stain, right? This was asked in both AIIMS and PGI. Now see the tumor and its relation. If you can see, where is the tumor? This pituitary tumor. Can you see? It is arising from anterior pituitary. Okay, so see the location. So the tumor is arising from anterior pituitary. This is the location of the tumor. Clear? And if you see the relation of this tumor, can you see what is the structure here? This is optic chiasma. So here you can see this is the tumor and this is the optic chiasma. So over a period of time, whenever there is increase in the size of tumor, can you see what is the problem? It is going to compress the optic chiasma, and we discussed what is the problem. There is bitemporal hemianopia. Means in pituitary adenoma we have to go for formal visual field charting to notice whether there is any kind of visual field defect or not. Simultaneously, since these tumors are going to secrete active substance, so we have to go for full endocrinologic profile in diagnosis. By the way, generally this pituitary adenoma, it is seen in 3rd to 4th decade, and it is equally common in males and females. Clear? What is the most common type of pituitary adenoma? The most common type of pituitary adenoma is prolactinoma. And what is the problem in prolactinoma? Because of excessive secretion of prolactin, these patients have galactorrhea and amenorrhea. So question, prolactinoma, this is the most common pituitary adenoma, and because of this the symptoms are, there is galactorrhea and amenorrhea. Simple. Now see how we are going to make the diagnosis. So just like any other brain tumor, we have to make the diagnosis of pituitary adenoma on MRI. So investigation of choice for diagnosis is MRI. One. Second, we have to go for full endocrinological profile to see that which hormone is increased, which hormone level is increased. Second, because of close relation of tumor with optic chiasma, we have to go for formal visual field charting. Now see the management. We can go for medical management as well as surgical management. Now you can see the tumor is located here. right? And what is the name of this sinus? Sphenoid sinus. So we can go for transsphenoidal excision of the tumor. And what are the approaches for this transsphenoidal excision? You can see either I can go from nose. So if I'm going from nose, this is known as intranasal transsphenoidal excision. And if I'm going from this approach, this is known as sublabial transsphenoidal excision. So these are the approaches. So now see how we are going to make the diagnosis. In these cases, investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that's MRI. Apart from this, what else we need? We go for full endocrinologic profile, and we go for formal visual field testing. Formal visual field testing, right? Okay, so you investigated this patient. What is the most common type of pituitary adenoma? That is prolactinoma, and we can manage prolactinomas with the help of drugs. Which drug? We can give bromocriptine. You must be knowing that bromocriptine is dopamine agonist, and it is going to decrease the prolactin secretion. So generally, what is the good thing? That this bromocriptine is going to shrink the prolactinoma. So see the management. We can go for medical management. So we can give bromocriptine, which is dopamine agonist. Clear? And this is going to shrink it can shrink prolactinoma. Okay, now in how many cases? In 75% of patients. And how much time it takes? Within 6 to 8 weeks. So within 6 to 8 weeks, if you use bromocriptine, it is going to shrink prolactinoma in how many patients? 75% patients. But the problem, suppose patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor. So if patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor, in that case, this bromocriptine is going to shrink that tumor only in less than 20% cases. So if the patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor, patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor, here the shrinkage will occur only in less than 20% patients. So what is a better agent than bromocriptine for growth hormone secreting tumor? And in these patients, we are going to use what? Octreotide. So in these patients, you can use octreotide, right? Now see, octreotide can decrease the level of growth hormone in 70% patients. But the problem, the tumor volume is going to decrease only in less than 30% patients. So two problems. Good thing that it is going to decrease the growth hormone levels in 70% patients. But the reduction in tumor volume, it occurs only in 30% patients. So one simple question, that if a patient is having prolactinoma and if a patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor, in which case you will prefer medical management and in which case you will prefer surgical management? So if prolactinoma is there, obviously we will go for medical management, but if patient is having pituitary adenoma which is non-prolactin secreting, clear? So in all those cases, generally we go for surgery. So surgery is preferred for growth hormone secreting tumor. So see what are the indications of surgery in pituitary adenoma. Indications of surgery in pituitary adenoma. So if patient is having growth hormone secreting tumor, or patient is having primary Cushing disease in which the tumor is in the pituitary, or patient is having adenoma and because of this adenoma there is acute visual deterioration, and if patient is having a mass, macroadenoma means large tumor which is non-prolactin secreting. So these are the indications for surgery. Now what kind of surgery is preferred? What is the route? Have a look. Now see here, this is the pituitary, and what is the name of this sinus? This is sphenoid sinus. So via sphenoid sinus I am going to excise the pituitary. Now see the route. if I'm using this nasal cavity, this is known as intranasal. This is intranasal. And if I'm using this approach, this is known as sublabial. So this is transsphenoidal excision of tumor, and two approaches are intranasal and sublabial. So see, we go for transsphenoidal excision of tumor. Trans means via sphenoid sinus. So transsphenoidal excision. And what are the two approaches? First is, this is intranasal. So here you can see I'm using this nasal cavity and I'm going to excise the tumor. And here can you see this is sublabial incision. So via this approach I'm going to excise the tumor. So second approach is sublabial. Clear? In certain patients we use radiosurgery. Radiosurgery is not radiosurgery, it's a type of radiotherapy. So in which patients of pituitary adenoma we use radiosurgery? So see, indications of radiosurgery. What are the indications of radiosurgery in pituitary adenoma? Now you have to understand that this is not the surgery, it's a type of radiotherapy. So this radiosurgery, it's a type of radiotherapy. And what is radiosurgery? In this case, concentrated dose of radiotherapy is given to a targeted volume in the brain. So in which cases we can use this? Anywhere where you use the radiotherapy. Now imagine a patient is there in whom you cannot perform the surgery. So if you cannot perform the surgery, what? You can use radiotherapy. If in a patient you remove the tumor, but you were not able to remove the tumor completely. So what kind of resection was there? Subtotal resection. So still tumor is there. That's why you have to give what? Radiotherapy. And if there is recurrence after surgery, in that case also you give radiotherapy. So this radiosurgery in pituitary adenoma can be used like primary therapy where surgery is not possible. It can be used in the patients where subtotal resection has been done, and it can be used in the patients in whom there is recurrence. Right? So these are the indications. It can be used as primary therapy, as adjuvant therapy after subtotal resection, and it can be used in recurrent tumors or patient having recurrent disease. Now see this image and tell me what is the name of this tumor. If you see what happens, this is the pituitary. Clear? So there is a tumor in relation to pituitary, and what kind of tumor? This tumor is cystic, and this tumor is having calcification. So this is a cystic lesion having supraciliar calcification. So what is the name of this tumor? This is craniopharyngioma, and we discussed that this is more common in children. And generally it is benign or malignant. It is benign. It is large, cystic, locally invasive tumor. So see, this is craniopharyngioma. Okay. So what kind of tumor? It's benign cystic lesion. So this is benign and cystic. Question which is asked frequently. It is more common in children, but there is a second peak also in craniopharyngioma, and this second peak is seen around 50 years of age, but more common in children. Now this was asked in anatomy also, that this craniopharyngioma is derived from Rathke's pouch. So it is derived from Rathke's pouch. Clear? And if you see the relation of this tumor, it is very close to pituitary stalk. So if you see, it is very close to this pituitary stalk, and sometimes there is extension into supraciliar cistern. So it is very close to pituitary stalk and there is extension into supraciliar cistern. Now what are the problems in this patient? Tumor is large and it is cystic. So and it is having locally invasive component. So if the tumor is large and cystic, first tumor is large, and that's why there is increased intracranial tension. And if there is increased intracranial tension, patient will be having signs and symptoms of raised intracranial tension, like there is headache, there is papilledema, these patients have vomiting, there is hydrocephalus. Second problem, Because of its close relation to optic chiasma, these patients have visual field abnormalities or visual field defects. Third, because of close proximity of the tumor with cranial nerves, there is cranial nerve palsy. So what are the problems here? It's a large cystic tumor. So what are the problems? Because of large cystic tumor, first there is raised intracranial tension leading to signs and symptoms of raised intracranial tension. Second, there is visual field abnormality because of close relation to optic chiasma, and there can be cranial nerve palsies. Clear? Apart from these problems, these patients have sleep difficulty, there is weight gain, these patients have personality changes. Clear? What are the characteristic features? And this question is asked in both pediatrics and surgery of craniopharyngioma. So see, in 90% patients, there is hypopituitarism. In 50% patients, there is growth retardation. Growth retardation, right? And in 10% patients, there is diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus. Clear? So this is the characteristic feature. Why? Because tumor is locally invasive and it is in close relation to pituitary. That's why these patients might be having hypopituitarism. Some of them are having growth retardation and diabetes insipidus. Now, how we are going to make the diagnosis? See, investigation of choice for diagnosis is MRI. And you know, MRI is better than CT for soft tissue evaluation and for cystic component evaluation. But the problem we discussed that all craniopharyngiomas are having calcification, and if we want to assess the calcification, one, or we want to assess the invasion into bony structure and sinuses. So invasion of bony structures and sinuses are better evaluated by CT, right? So diagnosis, investigation of choice for diagnosis, it's MRI. But we have to go for CT, and CT is better for assessment of what? If we want to assess the calcification or invasion of bony structure. So we want to assess the extent of invasion. Okay, into surrounding bony structures and sinuses. So that is better assessed by CT. This question was asked in NEET PG 2020. And this was the image based question, right? So you can see there is suprasellar calcification, and this suprasellar calcification is seen in what? Craniopharyngioma, right? Now how we can excise? You can see the relation of the tumor. It is very close to pituitary. So here also we go for transsphenoidal excision. But see, surgery alone is not curative in all patients. Why? Because there are tumor deposits in hypothalamus and brain parenchyma, and sometimes this tumor is adherent to vital structures. So if the tumor is adherent to vital structure, obviously you cannot excise that vital structure, so you have to leave some tumor remnant, and the some tumor remnant is left, there will be recurrence. And if there is deposits of tumor in hypothalamus or brain parenchyma, then also there is recurrence. So how we are going to take care of this? We have to give post-operative radiotherapy. So in majority of cases, what we go for? Transsphenoidal excision plus post-operative radiotherapy. So see the treatment, we go for transsphenoidal excision followed by post-operative radiotherapy. Clear? If you will not give radiotherapy, recurrence will occur in more than 75% of patients. Clear? So why there is recurrence if you will not give radiotherapy? Because the tumor is adherent, it is adherent to vital structures, Clear? And tumor deposits are there. Tumor deposits where? In hypothalamus and brain parenchyma. In hypothalamus and brain parenchyma. Clear? That's why we give radiotherapy to prevent the recurrence. Okay, so you excise the tumor, right? After excision, since 90% patients were having what? Hypopituitarism. So in these patients after surgery, lifelong pituitary hormone replacement therapy is given. Clear? So pituitary hormone replacement is needed lifelong. There is a question which is asked, what is the first hormone which should be replaced? And it is cortisol, which is also known as hydrocortisone. So after surgery, lifelong pituitary hormone replacement. Clear? Pituitary hormone replacement should be given. And what is the first hormone replaced? The first hormone which should be replaced, this was asked many times, it is cortisol. And what is the other name of cortisol? This is also known as hydrocortisone. Hydrocortisone. Clear? So craniopharyngioma is very important topic. It is asked in both pediatrics as well as in surgery. Now see, primary CNS lymphoma. Primary CNS lymphoma. In short, it is also known as PCNSL. Okay. So first question, since this is extranodal lymphoma, what is the most common type? The most common type of primary CNS lymphoma is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay. Now see, nowadays there is rising incidence or increasing incidence of primary CNS lymphoma. Why? Because one of the risk factor for primary CNS lymphoma is immunocompromised state. So there is rising trend in the patients of HIV, and there are transplant recipients who are receiving immunosuppressive agents. Clear? So because of this, what's the problem? There is increased incidence. Why? Because of immunocompromised state. So that's why you will find this tumor in HIV positive and immunocompromised patients, especially transplant recipients. Simple. Now comes the question, what is the most common type of primary CNS lymphoma? It depends that what kind of host is there. If there is immunocompetent patient, the most common type of primary CNS lymphoma is DLBL, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And if immunocompromised patient is there, the most common type is large cell with immunoblastic and aggressive features. So what's the most common type? First, in immunocompetent patient. Immunocompetent patient. In these patients, it's DLBL. We discussed many times, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And if patient is immunocompromised, then it is which type? It is large cell with immunoblastic and aggressive features. Immunoblastic and aggressive features. Okay. There is another question which is asked. Other name of this tumor is ghost cell tumor. So this tumor is also known as ghost cell tumor. Clear? Now why it is known as ghost cell tumor? See the problem. Suppose we are going to investigate this patient, we have to perform the CT of brain to assess whether this patient is having primary CNS lymphoma or not. But the mistake, patient was given steroids before the investigation. Steroids are having cytolytic effect on this tumor. Okay, so on this tumor, on these tumor cells, there is cytolytic effect of the steroid, and because of that, sometimes there is complete disappearance and sometimes there is partial disappearance of tumor. That's why we should not give steroids before investigation or before diagnosis of the tumor. Clear? So that's why this is known as ghost cell tumor. because of partial or complete resolution on CT after steroid. Partial or complete resolution on CT after steroid. Why? Because steroids are having cytolytic effects. Clear? In this case, what is the problem? There is a mass lesion. So primary CNS lymphoma is having a mass lesion. Because of this mass lesion, there are two problems. One, because of this mass lesion, there is increased intracranial tension. So patients will be having signs and symptoms of raised intracranial tension. And second, patients are having neuropsychiatric symptoms. Okay. So see the clinical features. These patients have mass lesions. Clear? And because of this, first, there is raised intracranial tension. So signs and symptoms of raised intracranial tension. Second, it leads to neuropsychiatric symptoms. Right? And the second problem, like other brain tumors, what? Patient can have seizures. Clear? Now, till now we discussed that for most of the brain tumor, what is the investigation of choice? It's MRI. This is the exception. Why? See, lymphoma anywhere in the body, histological confirmation is mandatory because we have curative treatment for lymphoma. And that's why anywhere in the body, if lymphoma is there, the investigation of choice for diagnosis is biopsy. So we go for MRI in this case, but the investigation of choice is biopsy. And what kind of biopsy is done? Stereotactic guided biopsy. Clear? So see how we diagnose this tumor. If we perform MRI, there is densely enhancing tumor. So on MRI, there is densely enhancing tumor. Right? But the investigation of choice for diagnosis, and that is stereotactic guided biopsy. And here also the same precaution is taken. What? That we are not supposed to give steroids before biopsy because steroids are having cytolytic effect. And if steroids are given, sometimes what? The result is non-diagnostic. So even after biopsy, it's non-diagnostic. So steroids should be avoided before CT or before biopsy. Now see how we are going to manage. So we are going to first divide the patient into two categories, whether patient is having AIDS or patient is not having AIDS. So if patient is immunocompetent, not having AIDS, so for non-AIDS patient, we go for chemotherapy since lymphoma is there. So chemotherapy is curative plus external beam radiotherapy for non-AIDS patient. Okay, and if patient is having AIDS, in these patients we give whole brain radiotherapy. Okay, apart from whole brain radiotherapy, we have to give high dose methotrexate, and we are supposed to give highly active antiretroviral therapy. So here we give high dose methotrexate, okay, plus we give HAART, so highly active antiretroviral therapy. Now despite of this kind of treatment, if a patient is having primary CNS lymphoma, prognosis is very poor, survival is less than 1 year. So these patients are having very poor prognosis. The survival even after treatment is less than 1 year. Now coming to the most important topic, and that's metastatic brain tumor. Metastatic brain tumor. Okay, so see the questions we already discussed. What is the most common brain tumor? Metastasis. What is the most common primary for brain metastasis? It is carcinoma lung followed by carcinoma breast. What is the most common primary for leptomeningeal metastasis? It is carcinoma breast. Now in brain, what is the most common site of brain metastasis? So this is cerebral hemisphere. And in cerebral hemisphere, which lobe? It's the frontal lobe. So see, most common site it is cerebral hemisphere, and in cerebral hemisphere, which lobe? It's the frontal lobe. So after cerebral hemisphere, second most common site is cerebellum, and third is brainstem. Clear? So the most common site is cerebral hemisphere. Clear? Frontal lobe is the most common site. Second question. In majority of cases, the brain metastasis is single or multiple? So see, in more than 70% patients, there are multiple brain metastasis. It's multiple. Now, how we are going to make the diagnosis? MRI. And with MRI, for better diagnosis, we go for gadolinium contrast. So, investigation of choice for diagnosis. So, here we go for MRI with gadolinium contrast. Clear? So, on MRI, if you see the tumor, means metastasis, it is well circumscribed and sometimes there is edema around the metastasis. And if you see the location, what is the exact location of metastasis? It is located at the junction of gray matter and white matter. So what is the exact location? It is located at the junction of gray matter or white matter. Right? Now see how we are going to manage the brain metastasis. We discussed that up to 3 metastases in liver, lungs or brain, in any one organ, up to 3 metastases to the liver, lungs or brain are resectable, and we can resect it. So if we are going to excise something in surgery, what is the term? Ectomy. And if there is metastasis and we are supposed to excise the metastasis, what is the term used? Metastasectomy. So if up to 3 metastases are there in brain, we can go for excision, that is known as metastasectomy. And if the number is 4 or more, in those cases we have to go for whole brain radiotherapy, right? So see, treatment. Number up to 3, we can go for metastasectomy. Clear? If the number is 4 or more, in these cases we go for whole brain radiotherapy. Can we use stereotactic radiosurgery? Yes, we can use radiosurgery, but radiosurgery is used only for smaller tumors. So whenever the size of brain metastasis size is less than 3 centimeter, we can go for stereotactic radiosurgery. This is a question. So stereotactic radiosurgery can be used, but the size should be less than 3 centimeter. What is the role of chemotherapy in brain metastasis? Generally, there is no role of chemotherapy. Chemotherapy, there is no role. But there are exceptions. Imagine if a patient is having small cell lung cancer, and because of that small cell lung cancer, there is metastasis to brain, or a patient is having seminoma. Because of that tumor, patient is having metastasis to brain. So if the primary is small cell lung cancer or seminoma, in these cases we use chemotherapy. So what are the exceptions? Means the conditions where you can use chemotherapy. So first, if the primary is small cell lung cancer, if it's small cell lung cancer, or primary is in the testes, and which one if the tumor is seminoma. Now we are going to discuss stereotactic radiosurgery. So first, see, it's not a type of surgery. What? It's radiotherapy. So it is a type of radiotherapy. So it's a misnomer. Stereotactic radiosurgery is non-surgical radiotherapy. So what is done here? This is non-surgical radiotherapy. Okay. Now see what's done here. you can see that there is cobalt, radioactive cobalt, and from this radioactive cobalt, what is being emitted? Gamma rays. And you can see what kind of gamma rays are being used. These are converging gamma rays, and here we are using a spherical helmet. Why? So that there is further beam narrowing. And can you see, this is the target tumor, a defined volume of brain where precisely targeted concentrated dose of radiotherapy is being given. So this is stereotactic radiosurgery. So what is done here? Precisely targeted concentrated dose of radiotherapy, and it is delivered to defined volume of brain. Defined volume of brain. Clear? So by this stereotactic radiosurgery, we can use functional abnormalities of brain. We can treat small benign and malignant tumors, right? Now, what are the methods of frame-based stereotactic radiosurgery? So the methods of frame-based stereotactic radiosurgery. First, we use gamma knife. So again, gamma knife is a misnomer because this is not a knife. Here gamma rays are used, and for this gamma rays, yes, what is the radioactive agent which is used? We use cobalt 201. So cobalt 201 is used, and second, we use modified linear accelerator. So we use modified linear accelerator. Clear? And these modified linear accelerators are going to deliver high energy X-rays. So it delivers high energy X-rays. Clear? So you got it? That here radiotherapy is being used and precisely targeted concentrated dose of radiotherapy is given. Now the problem, if concentrated dose of radiotherapy is given to a small or defined volume of brain, what is the problem? There are chances that this patient is going to develop radiation necrosis, or there is radiation induced damage to the surrounding brain. So these are the drawbacks. So what are the risks associated with stereotactic radiosurgery? First, there can be radiation necrosis. Clear? And second, there can be radiation injury to surrounding structure. So what are the common uses of stereotactic radiosurgery? Common uses of stereotactic radiosurgery. So this can be used in brain tumor, benign cystic lesions of cranial nerves. We can use it in AV malformations and trigeminal neuralgia. These are the indications. So how to remember? The mnemonic is BAT. Clear? So brain tumor, benign cystic lesions of cranial nerves, AV malformations and trigeminal neuralgia. We discussed that in metastatic brain tumor, what should be the size? Less than 3 cm. So generally it is used for small brain tumor. So this was stereotactic radiosurgery. There is another modality which is known as SBRT, and this is known as stereotactic body radiotherapy. So this is stereotactic body radiotherapy. It means here precisely targeted concentrated dose of radiotherapy is given to some organ in the body, not in the brain. Clear? So this is used and nowadays used also, and it's being investigated. It is being used as well as being investigated for treatment of both benign and malignant tumors. What size? Generally small to medium size. So if there is small to medium sized tumor in the body, both benign and malignant, it is used. At what locations? So it is used for tumors of lungs, liver, abdomen, prostate, spine, head and neck. Clear? So there are two modalities. One is SRS, stereotactic radiosurgery, and this is SBRT, stereotactic body radiotherapy.